So we put together as a staff an orientation for you based on some input from the executive committee. And also because lots of times people don't really understand what we do, so this is a good way to show people and let them know. I'm going to begin by talking about history, and then I'm going to pass it on to LaToya. I will say Judy Pickering was going to do this part today, but Judy is sick. She has a cold, so she is actually recovering, but she's just got a cold and is at home, and we appreciate her staying there. So let me start by talking about history, and just so that everybody knows, for a very good and comprehensive look at our history, you can go on our website, and in there you will find a piece called YCB Ready for Anything. It is a piece that was written by Jane Leonard in 2010. We will be updating it, but it talks about our history from 1985 through 2010, and it gives you a really good sense of how we started. She did a tremendous amount of research, including talking to Mayor Fraser and some of Mayor Fraser's staff and others, so I encourage you to read that piece, but let me give you some basic framework here. The YCB started in 1985. It came out of the planning process that Minneapolis Public Schools was doing at the time when Superintendent Richard Green was there. And he heard from a number of school people, but also folks in the community who they work with, saying, we need to better coordinate services and activities for our children and young people. We feel like things are kind of all over the place. We need some help making more sense of it. And they were also seeing greater needs in the school. So he came to Mayor Fraser, and out of that conversation, Mayor Fraser created this thing called the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. We are a joint powers board. We were originally set up with 5 jurisdictions, but since the library board no longer exists, they have been incorporated into the county. We have 4 major public jurisdictions: the city, the county, the parks, and the schools. These are the major jurisdictions who do work with children and young people in one way or another, and so that's why they were added. There was an intentionality about not allowing for proxies, and that had to do with having the decision makers at the table, as opposed to saying that anybody could come and then decisions kind of get lost. So there was an intentionality about having decision makers, elected officials, at the table to have these very important conversations. We also were created by state statutes, so we're embedded in the state statute as of 1985. We're the oldest of our kind in the United States. There are other things that are children's cabinets and things like that, mayor's cabinets, sometimes governor's cabinets, but we are the oldest one in the US. We also include the broadest range of public jurisdictions at the Youth Coordinating Board. We're kind of a model and do get asked to talk about that to people around the country from time to time. We have worked on behalf of children and young people 0 through 20 since the beginning. And over the years, we've taken on many projects along that age spectrum. And a few that I'll mention, there are many. And if you look at the YCB Ready for Anything piece, you'll see a lot more. But we have started Way to Grow, the Fathers Project. We did a project called Neighborhood Early Learning Centers for a number of years. The School District Family Resource Centers comes out of some of the work that we did. We worked one summer on Fat Summer, where we gave money to nonprofits to do work with kids in the summertime, after school activities. Step Up started at our table, and we also ran the Youth Are Here bus for a long time, which has become the outreach team. You're going to hear some about our current work today, but we're not going to talk about everything we do, but we are going to use it as examples of how our work happens today. In 2007, the board made a decision to end direct programming and to focus our time on systems change and public policy. And that is a fine line. Today we're going to talk a little bit later about being an intermediary and what that means, but we'll talk more about that with you later. But our work is primarily at the systems level, as opposed to serving young people directly. We work mostly with adults who work with young people. That's our work. And so at the same time that we made this decision to move away from programs, the board of YCB chose to start a new thing called the Youth Congress, which is a way to bring young people into the decision-making of the YCB and of our jurisdictions. So I'd like to introduce LaToya Balagoon, who has worked for us for I don't know how long now, but she's worked in the Youth Congress forever, and she's going to talk a little bit about the history of the Youth Congress, which is really a flagship program of the YCB.
Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for joining us on this Skype call. This is our new normal, so I'm very excited to kind of try out this technology and hope everybody can hear me for this presentation. So as you all can imagine, since 2007, the scope and impact that the Minneapolis Youth Congress has had has shifted significantly. What initially started as essentially a one-person team who was responsible for the full coordination and management of the Minneapolis Youth Congress has grown to 2 full-time staff positions with 7 contractor positions, coordinators as we call them, who work directly with Youth Congress members as their adult partners. We initially started with 6 committees and transferred over to about 7 committees in 2016 with the addition of the Green Committee. Some of the projects that we've really been excited and proud to work on. I will name a few here for you all. Starting in 2012, the transition from the yellow school buses to Metro Transit, which the Youth Congress cohort at that time piloted a project for 2 years, was able to leverage that data and provide that data to both the Met Council and Minneapolis Public Schools to really show how a wide demographic of young people would utilize public transportation in a way that hadn't been seen in the city before. As a result of that transition from public or traditional yellow school buses to public transportation, the needs of the young people were, for our perspective, important that we had a group of adults who would be able to help them through that transitional phase as they were beginning to move in and around downtown Minneapolis. So the outreach team actually was a suggestion that was housed in the Minneapolis Youth Congress, and because of our experience in having youth workers out in the city of Minneapolis, we were able to rapidly pull together a team of 6 outreach workers to help young people transition as they moved in and out of downtown Minneapolis. One of our most long-standing partnerships has been with the health department, which has allowed us to significantly impact the scope of service in the city of Minneapolis around menthol flavored tobacco, as well as T21, which has allowed Youth Congress members the opportunity to engage with both our jurisdictional partners, but also to testify in front of city council members about their experiences with tobacco and the impacts it has on their community and the youth as well. A partnership, again, with the health department allowed us to install a hydration station inside of Edison High School. Right now, we're currently working with the Minnesota Department of Education around their Minnesota Student Survey data. We have done this previously before, and we will be working with them again this year. One of our long-standing programs that we have is a teen job fair, which we've worked with CPED for quite some time. Again, all of this is really a coordinated effort to ensure that young people are at the table at the time that decisions are being made, knowing that their voice is instrumental in making sure that adults aren't solely doing things that we feel make sense, but that young people have the opportunity to lend their time, insight, and opinions to decisions that will impact them and their peers. We are very pleased that of the 7 coordinators currently hired, that 2 of them are former Youth Congress members, which really shows the ladders of leadership that we've built into our program. And I think I'm going to pass it along to Rachel and Ramiro.
No.
Oh, excuse me, Min.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Min. I'm the Communications Associate here at the YCB. And we're going to kind of transition this conversation into YCB structure and some of the benefits of being a small intermediary. And we think some of the biggest benefits of our structure and how we're positioned is that we're allowed to work quickly, we can have large ripple effects, and we can bring in local decision makers from all over. I guess kind of like another way to put that is like we think our job is to understand the big picture, to act quickly, and sort of be master connectors. And so I'm going to expand on a few of these points before I let Michaela dive deeper into this. But being positioned in between so many jurisdictions, we feel it gives us unique access to officials and experts, which is kind of a weird thing to say because technically everybody does have access to elected officials, but we think it's an intrinsic part of our work. So we're very intentional about building some of those relationships. And we think through those relationships, we can offer officials answers to questions that they might have, and then maybe open doors for people that don't necessarily always have pathways to some of the elected officials. And again, I think NYC is a great example of that. Like our middle schoolers and high schoolers in NYC often work with elected officials. And I'm just thinking back on my time in middle school and high school. Like I knew I had access, but it didn't always feel like a possibility. So I think that's, again, a really great example of how that all works. Another thing that I learned as we were preparing for this presentation is that most children's collaboratives across the country don't have elected officials on their board. So again, this kind of shows how it really opens doors, and I think it empowers us to work on local children's issues. And we build relationships with experts, like I said. I think a great example of that is how we've worked with the health department, the Minneapolis Health Department, and they have data and provided us with data and helped us work through the data when it came to working on the status of youth reports. And then after we worked through that, it was our job to sort of present that information and communicate that information in a way that made sense for our audiences.
Hey everyone, my name is Michaela. I am working on the Youth Master Plan. I'm currently here as an AmeriCorps Vista member, for those who are not familiar with me. I'm just going to kind of pick up with where Min left off and talk a little bit more about like the structure of our staff setup and the unique benefits it gives to us. So we are a small staff. We're seven-piece staff, including myself. That really allows us to be nimble and to respond quickly, especially when there's an issue that requires us to respond quickly. An example of this is Anne has been working on developing a kind of a youth emergency response chain of communication that she's now collaborating with the Office of Violence Prevention on. But it has been really easy to set that up, to get connected with the right people when we are such a small staff, and it's easy to share information and move quickly when we need to. Part of that is because we don't really have too much of a hierarchical structure. With 7 people, we're fairly limited with like the amount of like layers in staffing that there can be, and because of that, we don't really have that. There's really a limited like bureaucratic structure for us to get bogged down on, and does allow us to move very quickly in our work should the situation require it. It's also easy, in addition to the ease of like sharing out with other partners, it's also really easy for us to share knowledge between staff. Though a lot of it does happen informally via like water cooler talk and what have you. We also do some more formal methods of sharing out knowledge. A really good example is like honestly what's happening right now. Information is changing really quickly. We have to respond quickly, and I feel like through the last few days, our staff has, because we're so small, I feel like a lot of people, myself included, know what's going on with our staff, and we don't have to try to talk to 20 people to get like a shadow of an idea of what's going on. Like it's easy for 7 people to move quickly and communicate with each other, so that we all can message out relevant information should we be asked. I'll also say like the After School Network and Rachel's also been really great about compiling resources to send out to the community, which is another great example of how we move quickly and share knowledge as a staff. And also, Anne and Rachel talk more about this later on, but another benefit that I want to briefly touch on is that we don't necessarily need to have a big staff because of the amount of partnerships that we have. And also part of our structure as YCB is that we are kind of designed with our small staff and our numerous partnerships to have like that big picture bird's eye view of what's going on between our partners. So that is fairly unique to the Youth Coordinating Board and gives us a really good opportunity to coordinate between partners, to like really do what our middle name is. We also, because we work between a variety of jurisdictions, we are able to like leverage our partnerships between them and shepherd our work in a way that a single jurisdiction really can't do for like logistical or financial reasons. A great example is within the After School Network, some nonprofits were talking about they wanted to do more training and professional development, but it's really hard for a single organization to kind of do that all in-house. But with the partnerships that the Youth Coordinating Board has, we could maybe get space from MTS, get some expertise from the county, what have you, and kind of patch it all together. And that is a really unique benefit of not being confined to a single jurisdiction, not having a particular investment in either jurisdiction, since we are technically an independent body, though we do rely on our jurisdictions for a lot of our work to be done. As I'm talking, I know I've been talking a lot about like the advantages of a small staff, and there certainly are many. There are also some drawbacks being only a 7P staff. So I'm not in any way trying to say that like this is the ideal size and this is, you know, there still is some room to grow, and that might be something that we explore as a board or as a staff going forward. But throughout my own work with the Youth Master Plan, it's been evident that there are opportunities for us to expand our work and to kind of be more effective in our work and have a greater reach, but that will require larger capacity. But we do also realize the benefit of being smaller and being nimble and responsive. So it's also a benefit that each staff person is forced to kind of wear multiple hats and have a little bit of knowledge on everything. But there's also, it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time, but that's also okay. So to talk more about some things, we'll turn it over to Rachel. Rachel.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Oberghauser. I'm the project director here at the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. I'm going to be going back and forth with my colleague Ramiro here. Before we go on, Commissioner Green, did you, in terms of process, want to see if anybody wanted to pause for questions right now, or we can wait till the end as well? Not hearing anything from Marion Green. We'll just keep going and write your questions down, and we'll get you at the end. So what we're going to talk about right now is a little bit about the role of YCB. Many of you already know that the YCB we identify as an intermediary organization, and so I just wanted to start with a general definition of what that means, and then we'll talk a little bit more about strategies and then the specific YCB tactics that we do as an intermediary. So as an intermediary, it serves as the nucleus and the guiding coordinator within a community's multifaceted network of government, schools, practitioners, and frontline programs. And its goal is to improve outcomes around a specific issue, such as teen pregnancy, and or a population such as children and youth, which is ours. Intermediaries come into being to help achieve more efficient, effective relationships between layers of an ecosystem. And more mature intermediaries essentially take on many of the functions of a system, such as standard setting, quality assurance, training, advocacy, fund development, and data collection. So intermediaries do not provide direct services to families and youth. Rather, they provide services to the public and nonprofit partners that they do directly, that do actually do the service to families and young people. And I want to mention that Child Trends and Public-Private Ventures in a recent report noted that intermediaries have, quote, enormous contributions to the scope, scale, and effectiveness of grassroots organizations, and often does so at a low cost. And moreover, the work that intermediaries do often helps the government provide resources to community-based organizations more efficiently. So I'm going to invite my colleague Ramiro to come over, and he'll just briefly go through 6 strategies of intermediaries.
Greetings all. My name is Ramiro Vasquez Jr. I'm the Youth Development Specialist for the Minneapolis Youth Congress, and I will be going over the 6 strategies of intermediaries. I hope you're all having a good day at home, staying safe. So this is specifically from FSG, which is a mission-driven consulting firm established to help clients around the world create social impact. So the first one is guide, vision, and strategy. The second is support aligned activities. The third is established shared measurement practices. The fourth is build public will. Fifth is advocacy, advanced policy. And sixth, last but not least, mobilizing funding. And I'm going to pass it back to Rachel, and we'll keep going. Thank you.
Great. So we're now going to take some time to illustrate what that exactly looks like. And so if you're familiar with YCB and have seen some of our communications, we have the 5 C's. And the first C is convene. So convene partners and facilitate youth and community involvement in the process. The second one is collaborate to establish vision, goals, and strategies and increase collective effectiveness. The third one is champion policy issues, leadership, and action to benefit young people. The fourth is communicate progress, issues to be addressed, and outcome indicators. And the fifth one is create new pilot programs, information resources, and tools beyond the scope of individual partners. So you can see some overlapping between some of the strategies that Ramiro talked about just previously. So I want to talk a little bit about, since my work focuses on the after-school community, what those 5 C's look like in the after-school community. So we regularly, we regularly convene youth workers, and this is both just for the purpose of coordinating activities and efforts, but also for professional development and evaluation. In collaboration, YCB has partnered, for instance, with Sprockets and the Brooklyn Bridge Alliance for Youth and Ignite After School to offer Propel SEL, which was a multi-year professional development opportunity focused on increasing the skills of social emotional learning for after-school programs. In terms of championing in the after-school space, we partner with Ignite After School, which is our statewide after-school network, as well as the mayor's office to address the lack of funding in the out-of-school time space. In terms of communication, I want to give a huge thanks to my colleague Min, who helps me put out a monthly newsletter, and at least a couple times a month puts out youth worker jobs, as well as keeps our social media up to date on what's happening and what's available for youth workers. And right now he's put up a page on our website specifically around COVID-19 and some resources for youth workers and their families on that page. And then lastly, around the Create piece, What's Up 612 has been mentioned before as a way to have a one-stop shop for finding out of school time programming, and Min and I are currently working on a way to revamp this to be more efficient for families. So I'm going to pass it back to Ramiro, who will tell you a little bit about what these 5 C's look like in terms of the Youth Congress.
Hello again. I'm going to give you some examples as to how the youth operate within Minneapolis Youth Congress and adhere by these 5 C's. So convening, we have full Congress meetings with 40 to 50 youth, grades 8 through 12. We have committee meetings with one of our 7 committees with our coordinators and youth who are within those committees. And we have leadership development sessions, which really we rely on our youth to ask what is needed, which could be college and career readiness. It could be grant making skills. It's forever changing depending on what they would like. Collaborate. The youth have recently worked on JDAI Awaken the Inner Leader Youth Conference, which is with the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, and they collaborated with other organizations. It's on its 2nd year. They also worked on My CPAS with Min and Rachel, I think. Champion, we've done a lot of work with the health department, back to Latoya, around Tobacco 21 ordinance and flavored tobacco. We also did the Metro Transit Bus Pass project and are currently a part of the Mayor Youth Investment Task Force, facilitating conversations. We communicate, so that looks like, I like to consider them ambassadors to the city of Minneapolis. They relay information from you all to their peers and community members. Social media is a big asset. They relay information for different events or areas of need for their community, depending on their demographic and area. And then create. So we create the Teen Job and Opportunity Fair with our park partners, which is coming up relatively quick here in April. April 18th is the date. And our education committee has worked on a student bill of rights. And last but not least, they co-created the youth master plan with Michaela Ferg. And I will pass it on to Ann DeGroot. Thank you.
I'm back. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing okay with all this information. And I hope it's helpful to you. I look forward to hearing from you about ways you might like to have this done in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about the early childhood space in connection with the C's, because that's an area we work in and have for a very, very long time. We convene a group of child care center directors. We call it Child Care Center Directors and Friends because it's center directors and folks from all of our jurisdictions who work in early childhood to try to find ways to do early childhood work in a better way. It started in 2011 when a number of child care directors came to us and said, we are having trouble accessing child care assistance programs. Can you help us? We went to Hennepin County, and this is a collaborative piece, and said, can you help us figure out what the problem is? And so Hennepin County allowed their research staff to do research of child care center directors in Minneapolis to find out what the problem was. And they did that work and found out that the problem was that we did not have a universal form to turn in to allow child care centers to access information that would help their clients in child care. So kids were often leaving child care when they were, before they were done because their paperwork wasn't finished. So we figured a way to work that through, and that was actually a great project. that project led that group to have regular meetings and to convene regularly. One of the things that happened out of it is that some of the Hennepin County staff said to our child care directors, we've never actually seen each other. We just communicate by email and by voicemail and stuff. So it created kind of an early child care or childhood networking group that has been very useful to this day. That group has also worked to create immigration tapes, which you can find on our website, which help child care centers understand legal issues around immigrants and also how to establish a base in their centers around being open to having people who are immigrants in their base. So that's a very good tape, that very good thing that we do. And they have created the Family, Friend, and Neighbor Network project, which we have had funding from the Pritzker Foundation over the last 2 years, and have a Pritzker Fellow, Debbie Ziesmer, who works on coordinating family, friend, and neighbor care. An outcome of that I'd like to mention is that prior to this, when we go to early child care meetings kind of across the state and with other jurisdictions, very often people never talked about family, friend, and neighbor care, and now it's always on the agenda. And in fact, there's some legislation to try to fund some work right now. We'll see how that goes. So that's kind of how it plays out a little bit in the early childhood space. I'd like to finish this section, though, by talking about what does all of this allow us to do. When I first started this job, Dick Mammon, who was our first executive director, many of you know Dick, told me that your job is to be like an air traffic controller. Monitor how things are going and let people know what's happening in all the different places, because you have a particular bird's eye view of the landscape. And in that place, you can be very helpful to all four partner organizations by being able to tell people what's going on elsewhere and to be able to help people connect with each other in ways that make sense. So one of our jobs is to be that overview. We are not connected to any of you individually, but we're connected to all of you, and we're connected to people at levels that we can actually have some good overview. And so that's continues to be a very important role that we have. The other thing is that we have always been able to access all four of your jurisdictions to help us do work. We do that in many, many ways. When Commissioner Dorfman was on our board, she would always say, ask everyone else to do the work. Get your jurisdictions to do the work. You're not here to set up a whole new organization. And so that's what we do. We've had tremendous assistance from all of your staff. Hardly ever does anybody ever say no, and if they say no, it's because they just aren't able to do it, or they know someone else who would do a better job. We see and facilitate connections between jurisdictions and the community. Lots of times community members, we've seen this a lot in early childhood and after school, they see us as an entree point into all of you. So they come to us and say, how do I talk to the city about something? And so we can play that role. And I think overall our role is to clarify and communicate jurisdictional roles for the purpose of most effectively serving children and young people. And we do that in part by bringing us all together on a regular basis and figuring out what that would look like. So that's most of our presentation. I think Min is going to show you a graphic. We have put together a piece that is quite long that shows what all of our programs are and how they, or all of our initiatives are and how they fit into sort of different goals and things. So Min has attempted to turn that into a graph, or to a graphic, and he's going to show that to you now. We're working on it. We want you to see this, and we'll make it available to you.
I have a question.
Councilmember Gordon has a question.
Can you hear this?
You have to go here.
I do.
Yes, you do.
I guess it's a question and a suggestion. I think that we heard earlier that there's 7 staff. Is that right?
Correct.
And so then there's going to be a question about what are the youth workers? Are they employees of somebody? What about all the contracts? And I was thinking it might be helpful to have some kind of an organizational chart where we could see who these 7 key staff are and how they touch all the rest. And I am kind of curious about then are we supervising how many contracts and who and how many individuals actually kind of are working for us loosely? And if those contractors have any kind of protections or anything, or why are they contractors?
That's an excellent question. We do have an org chart and can provide that. We have a number of contractors. All of our outreach team members and all of the Youth Congress coordinators are contractors, and they do work on contracts, so they don't have health insurance, they don't have the benefit of unemployment compensation and things like that. So we can talk more about that at another time, but those are questions, those are good questions. Madam Chair, Commissioner Musicant is on and needs to leave and is wondering if she can say something.
Oh, yes, please. Absolutely. Well, thank you for accommodating me. I'm just drawn in so many directions with the coronavirus these days. And thank you for your service, Commissioner Musicant. Seriously, you know, as a public health official, I just feel so grateful for people like you doing incredible work. Thank you. Thank you. And our team of staff that are involved in this response has grown to 40 now. We're generating lots of good expertise towards this end. But what I wanted to say about this discussion that we're having at the Youth Coordinating Board is just how much it has influenced our work and the work of the city as a whole. The city council and the mayor just signed a document, I think on Valentine's Day, for the city of Minneapolis to enter into a child